It's really a pleasure to meet you.
You too.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and how you came into politics?
Yeah, so I am a mom, and I professionally was a marketer for most of my career. I've worked in hospitality, some of the most notable hospitality brands in Philadelphia. I've served on their executive teams or in some way on their marketing teams. And 5 years ago, just after I gave birth to my son, my family became aware of the Manor East project that would come through our neighborhood.
Which I am very aware of.
Yeah.
And that's why I started following you.
So, you know, I became intimately aware of not just the dangers that come with this oil and gas expansion throughout the state of Pennsylvania as fracking and the export of energy and feedstock for plastics becomes a major economic driver for Pennsylvania. There's a lot of collateral costs to that. It's beginning to cost our communities locally.
I was gonna say, yeah, people
and
are running out of their homes.
Yeah, and people's health and their safety and the quality of our water, the quality of our air. And so, you know, in addition to that, I also became very aware of the influence of money in politics and lobbyists and special interests that make, you know, I found when I was going through this that and actually opioids were also something that were involved in this. My state representative was receiving regular contributions from the 3 companies involved in putting the pipeline in my backyard. But then also, there were groups that are pushing for no gun regulation, anti-union policy, and policies, and lots of pharmaceutical companies. And so, you know, you start to understand why your community's voice isn't being heard in government when you start to see what those finance reports look like. And so that's really what led me to run for office, was to, honestly, it was to start a conversation about the fact that this money is a factor in all of this, and how does it influence decisions our representatives are making. And that message really resonated with people, and clearly, because I'm here.
Yeah. So a huge topic in politics is the rise of opioid and substance abuse in the U.S. Can you tell me the estimated number of people with substance abuse issues in Chester County?
I don't know for sure what the total amount is. I think that's something that's probably hard to gauge because so many people are suffering with substance use disorders who are not in treatment, or who don't ever come into contact with county or state agencies, whether that's for treatment or for, unfortunately, law enforcement, and very sadly, the ones that we do have the ability to track are the deaths. And so we do know that the largest population of people who are being impacted by substance use disorders and overdose deaths are males from the age of 25 to 44, predominantly white men right now in the county are really suffering with substance use disorders. And I had a great conversation with our coroner just a few weeks ago, and she talked about how it's not just opioids. In most cases, there's the findings in the autopsies are that there are multiple substances present, often alcohol, opioids, and THC, so marijuana. And so the biggest driver right now that they're finding we saw a decrease from 2017 to 2018 in opioid deaths in the county, but then in 2018 to 2019 we saw an increase. And so one of the factors that Christina mentioned when we talked was that fentanyl has become a huge kind of factor in this epidemic, and that we're seeing an increase in overdose deaths because fentanyl is so deadly and so such a powerful substance that people are just not familiar with. They don't understand the implications of drug use, and it's found in so many different kinds of drugs, not just opioids, on drugs on the street. So we are seeing an uptick in Chester County right now.
I know we also talked about the children, but the children in these homes. Are there any county or state programs for children of drug addicts or substance abusers?
So primarily, we're seeing kids that are going into care with their grandparents because of, or siblings, or aunts and uncles, because of a parent is having an issue with substance use disorder or an overdose death, unfortunately. And so I serve on the Children and Youth Committee. It's something that we are regularly talking about because it is a growing problem that has created some unique circumstances. Grandparents who are not actively working, so there are some income challenges in terms of the ability to provide for children on a fixed income, housing challenges, long-term plans for kids when their senior grandparents are caring for them, and what are the long-term plans for those children, and permanency for them. One of the biggest ways to a child, whether they've been separated from their parent because of incarceration or because of death or because of any other reason that drives them into the foster care system or into the care of a family member, is the greatest factor to not repeating those generational family challenges that can be a problem, is permanency, and giving kids permanency, which means that they have a permanent home, they have a long-term support system, really working hard to get kids that are in foster care into permanent homes before they turn 18. Because think about it, when you and I were 18, were we able to fend for ourselves in the world? And oftentimes when we're sending these young people out into the world without that support network of their family, and they don't have the resources and support that they need to really create a good foundation for themselves and not fall into some of the same patterns that their family has generationally dealt with. And so how do we help grandparents who may not be able and healthy long-term to care for these young children and give them that sense of permanency? And so I wish I could say that we have the solutions to that, but this is a new problem. And so we're still kind of working through those things and trying to create more resources at a time where funding for county governments gets cut year after year. And so we really have created some pretty significant roadblocks to being able to provide those services that are desperately needed for families that are facing not just the opioid epidemic in terms of people who have use disorders needing treatment, but also for the family.
That leads to my next question. Do you see, if any, programs or a new health reform in the future?
I mean, how do I say this nicely? We are in a situation where we have the General Assembly, the setup of the General Assembly is really made up of people who don't believe in centralizing these services and having these services public services. So right now when the legislature is working so hard to privatize everything and to gut these agencies that help people in order to drive the demand for private market solutions, we're in a really tough spot to creating that reform. And so there's lots of really good proposals, but none of them get a hearing. And if they don't get a hearing, they don't get a vote in a committee. And if they don't get a vote in a committee, they'll never see the light of day on the floor. And so it's really important for people to understand when they're voting, and also when they are advocating for issues. I say all the time to advocates, have you considered running for office? Because when people come in to talk about these issues, if they're trying to convince somebody else who has power, but how do you get that power to have that vote? And that's a big reason why I run for office. It's like taking that power back for the community to be able to say, these are our values, these are our priorities, these are the things that we want to see happen, and we're not going to leave that in the hands of people who don't want to help or to support these programs. Because the number one thing that the legislature does is appropriate funding. And the number one way to create these programs and reforms is to fund them. And so we really do need to elevate the conversation, help people in the public who vote and those who don't vote, because they should vote, to understand the implication of those votes and why we're not seeing some of the things that we think we should be seeing. The budget was a real eye-opener for me in terms of just watching how money gets prioritized. You know, over the years, we've increased money for quote-unquote economic development, to give grants to luxury hotels and luxury apartment complexes. And we've got kids and families that are like suffering tremendously with the crisis of opioid addiction, with some of our schools just not being healthy environments for kids that need to be repaired, but that those things are not being prioritized. And so right now, I would say that our government is set up to work for businesses and corporations and not necessarily for some of these really important issues for people.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so good to see you in person, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.